Good. Good luck, everyone. We're starting a new parak. We're up to the fourth parak in Sanhedrin, and we're up to Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. So we're continuing to discuss the makeup of the bezin and the protocols. So there are different kinds of batadinin, obviously, for commercial disputes, one type of bezin, and then there is for capital crimes, another type of bezin. And we learned in the first Mishnah that for a commercial bezin, you need 3 judges, and we learned from Sukkim. And for capital crimes, you need a bezin of 23, and we learned that out from Sukkim. So the Mishnah says that even though on the one hand, there's a certain equanimity between the two different court systems, on the other hand, there's a number of differences, as we will list them in the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Echad dinei mamanis, echad dinei nefashis, whether it's commercial law, whether it's matters of capital punishment, b'drisha v'chakira. We learned previously that we cross-examine the witnesses. Chakira is that to exactly because this
Can't hear you.
With us very time.
You're cutting out.
Okay. Can you all hear me now? Good. Okay. So that's Chakiris, plays a central role in the testimony of witnesses. Then we have a thing called Bedikas or Drishas. That is basically asking details, specifics about what color clothes did the person wear, all kinds of other details. So this Mishnah holds that it doesn't matter what the dispute is about, whether it's dinimaminus or whether it's a capital crime, we need to cross-examine the witnesses. That's what this Mishnah said. Even though we learned before we don't, we're going to discuss that. So you need the Shakir Shnemer. It says Mishpat Echa Yilachem. You have a uniform justice across the board. But on the other hand, they're not exactly the same. Ma bein dini mamanis and dini nefashis. What differences are there between dini mamanis and dini nefashis? And the Mishnah will list a whole bunch. Number one, as we just mentioned before, dini mamanis b'shleisha. They only have 3 judges. And dini nefashis be'esim. When it comes to capital crimes, 23 judges. Number one. Number two, when it comes to by dini nefashis, the Torah goes out of its way to say that you have to do everything within your means to try to save the alleged criminal, the defendant. You don't have that concept at all by dinei mamanis. Plus, by dinei mamanis, if you side with one person, you're hurting the other person. So the Mishnah says as follows. What's the difference between dinei mamanis and dinei nefashis? Dinei mamanis b'shleisha. Dinei mamanis, Dinei mamanis poischin bein l'schus bein l'chayva. The opening statements, you can begin your discussions. It doesn't matter whether you try to defend the defendant or whether you're prosecuting the defendant or you think that he's wrong. You can start either way. But dinei nefashis, when it comes to dinei nefashis, always poischin l'schus. You should start out trying to defend this person. Don't immediately start out saying the person is guilty. See if you can find a way of saying, well, excuse this person or whatever it is. Then another difference. Dinei mamanis, we learned in the first Mishnah. Dinei mamanis, matin al pi echad. When it comes to commercial law, you have 3 judges, the majority wins. Doesn't matter whether you find the person responsible, has to pay, liable or not liable. It makes no difference. Matin al pi echad. One witness is sufficient. Bein l'schus, bein l'chayva. Whether this finds the person innocent or finds the person is liable, it makes no difference. But din in the fascist, we had this in the first Mishnah. Matin al pi echad l'schus. You have a majority of one. Only you have 23 judges. So we have 11. You have 12 versus 11. That's all right if you're trying to find the person innocent. We learn from a pasuk, but when you want to incriminate the person, a majority of one won't do. It has to be a majority of two, but practically speaking, it's really a majority of three because it's an odd number 23. But you can't have a majority one, so the next one will be 13 versus 10. That's 23. In fact, how do you ever have a majority of two? And we said in the Gemara before, you can have a majority of two is where the 23rd judge says, I don't know. And if we keep on adding two judges, and the maximum is the same amount of people as you have in the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, it was 70 people. So when you get to 70, it'll be a majority of only two. Then the Mishnah continues. Dini Mamonis, when it comes to money matters, Machzidin, even the Bezin gave a sentence, a verdict, but if they realize they made a mistake, they can always retract. Lischus, it makes no difference if previously they found them innocent, they found them guilty, you can always retract, rescind. But Dini Nefashis, if they found that this person is innocent, they cannot retract it. Machzidin Lischus, the aim marzin l'chayv. This is almost like we have the concept of double jeopardy. If you found the person is innocent, you cannot find him guilty. Dine mamanis, when it comes to dine mamanis, money matters. Hakul malam nizchus v'chayv. Even the student sitting nearby can participate and try to advocate one way or another. But dine nefashis, if you're not part of the bezin, hakul malam nizchus. Everyone has a right to intervene and try to find a basis for his, exoneration. You cannot learn chayv. You cannot. Only the dayanim themselves are the ones who can find him guilty, not the students. Another difference. If you started out thinking the person is guilty, you can then change and find him innocent, or vice versa. If you initially thought he was innocent, you can then change your mind. When it comes to matters of life and death, if you initially thought he was guilty, you can always change and think he's innocent. You cannot then turn around and learn chayv. Another difference. Dine Mamanis done in B'yayim, B'gayim in B'layla. Every court case has to start by day. We learn out from leprosy. B'yayim says that by day you should show it to the kohen. So we learn out of Shava, as we'll see in the Gemara later, that a court case has to start by day. But Dine Mamanis, you can continue into the night. B'gayim in B'layla conclude at night. But Dine Nefashis done in B'yayim, B'gayim in B'yayim. We'll learn from Sukkim later that you can only adjudicate during the day, not at night. Even if you commence during the day, you cannot continue into the night. Another difference. You can finish your entire court case the very same day. Even if you want to find the guy you're responsible, you can finish the same day. But din nefashis, come to din nefashis. Din nefashis, you're going with that day l'schus, but b'yom shalach l'chayv. If you think the person is innocent, you can complete the entire court case in one day. But if you think the person is guilty, you need to sleep on it. You got to wait, pause until tomorrow. Maybe in the morning you'll have a fresh perspective and you can find some way to make this person innocent. Therefore, because you have this problem by din nefashis, you always have to have 2 days minimum to try the person. Ain't done in Shabbos Yom. We won't have court cases Friday or Erev Yom Tov because it's a 2-day case. And the problem is, let's say on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, you decide the person is guilty. We have another law that says that you have to exact the punishment on the very same day that you come up with your verdict, with your sentence, because you're not allowed to delay justice. And on Shabbos, you cannot you cannot mete out punishments. Even a bezdin who has a mitzvah to mete out a punishment, but not on Shabbos. So therefore, you cannot have. And the poskim say that dini mamanis, even though technically you can do, it's only 1 day, so you should be able to do it at Shabbos, but we don't have any court case at Shabbos for a number of reasons. But one of them is you might be distracted. You're thinking about Shabbos, you got to prepare. You cannot focus on the court case on hand. Another difference, dini mamanis. Laws a commercial law. Hatmei is a tara, so laws to do with tamei, tara, tray for kosher. Maschili minagodl. You always start from the give respect, show respect to the Av Bezin. He should start first, and then it doesn't matter whether his opinion is. You can always argue. But din in the fashes. When it comes to capital crimes, you always start from the lowest members of the Sanhedrin, and you work your way up to get to the top. And why is that? Because once the top person gives an opinion, either the two different opinions in Rashi, either different Rashis, either you're not allowed to argue with him, Lesana al Riv, Lesana al Rav, you're not argue with the Rav, or you wouldn't dare argue. You're allowed to, but you wouldn't dare. And therefore it's not fair. And this is how some Mefarshim want to explain the Gemara Gittin, that it says there that Tzcharia ben Avkulus, when Bar Kamsa brought an animal and inflicted a blemish, and the rabbis wanted to kill him because he would go back to the Roman government and say we didn't bring up the carbon. And Rabbi Chaim Kula said, no, you can't kill somebody for bringing an animal with a mum. So they said, let's bring the animal with a mum. And he said, no, you cannot bring an animal with a mum on this bech. So the Gemara concludes, because of the humility of Chaim and Akulis, the base of Meir is destroyed. And everybody wonders, where do you see in this story any humility? On the contrary, he's always offering his opinion. So Atim Raz Chayes, he wants to say, based on this Mishnah here, he was a humble person, and therefore, even though he was the head of the Bezin, he never accepted the fact that he was the head of the Bezin. He always felt that he was the lowest member of the Bezin, so he always gave his opinion first. The problem is, once he gave his opinion, because he was the Av Bezin, nobody can dispute it. And therefore, they couldn't kill Bar Kamsa. And that's why the base of Meir was destroyed, because of his humility. In fact, the world says, how can we say Moshe Rabbeinu? Why don't we say Rabbeinu Moshe? Every rabbi would say Rabbi this, Rabbi that. Why, when it comes to Moshe, they say his name first and then Rabbeinu? So they want to say, Moshe had many qualities. He was the greatest prophet. He was the biggest Talmud Chacham, and so many qualities. And yet, his greatest virtue was that he was humble. He was just Moshe. He was a humble person, and therefore that precedes all the other things that makes him Rabbeinu. That's why it's called Moshe Rabbeinu. Anyway, then the Mishnah concludes. Anybody can be a judge for Dini Mamres. When it comes to capital crimes, you cannot be a ger or a mamzer to be a dayan on capital punishment. Only a kohen, Levi, or Yisrael who is suitable to marry a kohen. Says the Gemara, our Mishnah starts off saying that there is you cross-examine witnesses, but we know it's accepted that we don't cross-examine witnesses when it comes to money commercial law, and we're going to prove it from a brisa. And we have now a contradiction. We had a concept, and we learned this previously, and that's called, there's a contract called a shtar muktim, and there's a contract called a shtar mu'ucher. The difference between a shtar mu'ucher and a shtar muktim is as follows. You have a contract, I lend you money on today, we write today's date, today's place, and now there's a lien on all your properties. If you sell it, I have a right to collect it if you have no money for me. But what happens if we predate the shtar muktim? A shtar muktim is disqualified. The reason is because the shtar puts a lien on the property, but it's wrong if you put a lien on other people on your properties prior to the actual date of the loan. And therefore, we decided to cancel the shtar completely. It doesn't even work for the correct date because you'll deceive buyers. It's not a good shtar at all. That's one view. And there's actually an argument whether the shtar is useful at all, even to collect directly from the labor, or we disqualify the entire document because we want to penalize you. There's another kind of shtar called a shtar mu'ucher. Shtar mu'ucher is a delayed shtar. A shtar mu'ucher means that we don't write the date of the loan, we write the date 3 months later. So Rashi, the longer Rashi trace, Rashi says what happened was, let's say the date was Nisan, but the Eidim didn't write it till Sivan. So 3 months later. Which is all right, because the only person who gets hurt from this is the lender, because now the lien has been pushed off 3 more months. Any property sold in between, he has no access to. And then when the witnesses write the later, if they wrote the shtar 3 months later, they write that day, but they write the place where the loan took place, not the place where they write the shtar, which therefore opens up the possibility that witnesses will come along and say, hey, that day that you wrote the shtar and you wrote the place, you weren't in there. You were with us somewhere else. And that's true. But because the shtar was written delayed, they therefore wrote the place of the loan, not the place where they actually wrote the star. That's called a star mucha, and therefore it's kosher. According to Taisus, they actually wrote the star on the very day the loan took place. They just wrote a later date. So again, the witnesses therefore is kosher. So what happens in the following case? Says the Gemara here, it says, have a problem. The Amish says that you have to cross-examine the witnesses. I'll show you that we don't. For the Ramina, that's a question. The star are written that this loan took place the first day of Nisan B'Shmita, in the year of Shmita. Now, generally speaking, people don't lend money in Shmita because they get cancelled. But that's what the Shah wrote. Ubo Adim came along, Amru, and witnesses said, contradicted Shtar. How can you say that you saw the loan on this day in this place? Well, I'm complaining. Imano Yisim, the more complaining. You were with us on that very day somewhere else. The din is that Shtar kosher the Eduk Shade. Why? We suspect, we surmise that Shema Ichru because who? Rather than saying that these witnesses are false, we'll say, you know what? Maybe it's a delayed Shtar. Now, what's going on here? These are the If you can tell me that we cross-examine witnesses, which means we'll ask witnesses on the star when exactly was it written, and if they claim it was written and on the day that it says on the star and at that place, and two other witnesses come along and say you weren't there that day, then that's the din of Ein Zayim. What right do we have to start, reinterpreting? The whole purpose of cross-examining witnesses for that very purpose, to know the exact date. Because what are we trying to defend? These witnesses, they're liars. If we had to cross-examine them, doesn't that prove that we do not cross-examine the witnesses, and therefore we surmise they're innocent and just a delayed star? So the Gemara now digresses for 1 minute. The Gemara says it's a good question, but you could have asked the same question instead of a brayta from another Mishnah. The concept will the time make, according to you, your question, Tikshloch must listen. Better ask a question from a Mishnah where it says, if you have a star with an early date puzzle, but because you're cheating the buyers, even if witnesses come along and say, hey, you weren't there that day, it's still kosher. So we can tell them that we have to cross-examine the witnesses to know precisely when it happened. Why is it kosher? Why are you surmising that maybe it's a delayed star? So you could have asked the same question from the Mishnah. So as Gemara says, you're right. Holy kasha. That what you're asking me now is not really a question. The adif mene kamim. Our Bryce's question is much stronger than the Mishnah. You know why? Because the Bryce, the date written on it was the first day of Nisan of the Shemitah year. What are the chances that if genuinely this is a genuine loan, not a fraudulent shtar, and even they delay it, they wouldn't delay it into the year of Shemitah when people was highly suspect that the loan took place. Because nobody lends money in the year of Shemitah when you're scared the guy doesn't pay you in the next few months. You're going to lose it all. Because Shemitah, you're not allowed to collect money. So therefore, and even so, we are going to try to interpret that the star really is kosher, it's a delayed star, and all that kind of stuff. And therefore, it's a very strong question. If we really cross-examine the witnesses, what's going on? It's definitely a fraudulent star. The Bryce is telling you, even if they wrote the first day of Nisan, of the Yeshmiti, nobody lends money there. The Lekkel, we can't really say Shemi Churula Kasru is delayed. The Lemara L'Shtara, why would you, if the loan took place before Shemitah, why would you put the date of Shemitah? And yet we try to say that the star is kosher. Because generally it's the end of Shemitah that cancels the common cash. We got a problem. The problem, our Mishnah says that you cross-examine witnesses, and from the Brisa of the year of the Shemitah, it's clear that we don't cross-examine, and we have to try to figure out so what actually happened. And we'll say, you know what, maybe it was a delayed star. How do we reconcile that? Now, the custom, many people are that we do two prusbals. We do a prusbal at the end of the 6th year, and we do a prusbal again at the end of the 7th year. The prusbal is a way of circumnavigating the problem of Shemitah. So we sort of hand over all of our debts, all of our loans to the Bezdin, and they're collecting it. And we're just doing it on their behalf. So the Gemara clearly says it's the end of the 7th year, that's Meshamet, that cancels the debt. That's the view of Rashi. The Rosh and others hold it's actually the beginning of the 6th year. That cancels the debt, the beginning of the 7th year, that cancels the debt. Because Shemitah year, the entire Shemitah year. But if you borrow the money in the year of Shemitah itself, then it's the end of the year that cancels it. But if you borrowed money prior to Shemitah, then it's Shemitah that cancels it. And when the Gemara says over here that the end of Shemitah cancels, is talking about if the person comes to me in the 8th year and pays me back a loan from before, I have to tell the person, we went through a Shemitah, the loan is canceled, and this person has to say, I know, but nevertheless, I want to repay you. So there's a machlekes. Is it the beginning of the seventh year that cancels all the debts, or is it the end? And that's why we make a prusbul on both years. Okay, so now we have a problem. How do we reconcile the mission of the Bryce? The Gemara will give us three answers. Answer number one, and this is a quote in the Gemara. Amar Chaim says, our Mishnah is talking about from the Torah perspective. The Bryce is talking about from the Rabbanon's perspective. About Torah, according to Torah, whether it's matters of commercial or whether it's the dinafashas, b'drisha v'chakira. You need to cross-examine. Remember, it says, "Mishpat echad yilachem." Should be uniform laws across. So why in the Bryce did the rabbis decide you don't have dishakira? We don't want to make it difficult for lenders to recoup their money. Remember, the lenders are not allowed to charge interest. They're really doing a favor. So if we're gonna, if they lend money and then the borrower denies it, and he has to find witnesses, and the witness will get cross-examined, and it's quite possible that they're going to stumble. It's not fair. The one said, "What do I need this headache for?" It's not fair. Says the Gemara. So what are you telling me, Mahat Torah? They should have been in cross-examined. Telling me the Rabbanon. Now we learned before, but you learn tomorrow as well, that the rabbi, if the Bez, if they weren't mumchim and they made a mistake in law, they have to reimburse the person that they paskin wrongly to. But if you're telling me that the rabbi's hand is sort of tied, they cannot cross-examine the witnesses, they can come up and say, why should we have to reimburse? If we would have given the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, we would have teased out the truth and we would have found the right psak. So it's not fair. So the Gemara, Elamiata, for this, if a Bezdin made a mistake, they shouldn't have to reimburse anybody because they'll argue that you didn't give us a chance to cross-examine them. Says the Gemara, if we would say that the Dayanim are not responsible if they make mistakes, what do you think the lenders are going to say? Why in the world would I lend money? I'll never get justice anyway. Surely we're going to close all the doors for borrowers because the lenders will refuse to lend. So Chanina says that our Mishnah is talking about from the Torah's perspective, you cross-examine. The Bryce is talking about from the rabbi's perspective, we don't cross-examine when it comes to loans. Okay, there's an argument in Rishonim. What about when it comes to theft? These things, whether you cross-examine the witnesses or not. Rava says, I'll give you another answer. Masnis is the Hocha. Our Mishnah is talking about dinei knossos, penalties. Penalties. Let's say if you steal, you have to pay a second kefil, or if your animal causes damage, you have to pay. There's no issue of, next time you're going to make it difficult for the lender. It doesn't apply there at all. So there you have to follow the Torah and you have to cross-examine. The Bryce is talking about admissions and loans. We admitted to a person, I owe this person money. In that case there, we want to make it as easy as possible for the lender to recoup their money, and therefore you don't cross-examine the witnesses. That's answer number two. So our Mishnah is talking about penalties. You can say the Mishnah and the Bryce is about talking about admissions and loans. And so how come our Mishnah says you have to interrogate and the Bryce says no? Kan bedin meruma. Here, the Bryce, our Mishnah is talking about where you suspect that the plaintiff is lying. You don't know that for a fact. If you knew that for a fact, you know what, you throw the case out, won't even listen to it. You don't know for a fact, but you suspect. Either because a track record, rumors abound about this person. So then, if there's a din meruma, you need to cross-examine the witnesses to find out the truth. Or the Bryce is talking about an ordinary case, but there's no reason to suspect anybody's lying. They just have different ways of looking at things. There, we don't cross-examine the witnesses. How do I know that? Rish Lakish has a question. One person says, that with justice you should judge your friend. And there's another pasuk which says tzedek, it says double tzedek. It says right. It says tzedek to the right, double tzedek. Okay, it says kan b'dimerume. When it comes to a dimerume, when you see the guy is telling a lie, then tzedek. You got to be very, very thorough. But in our Mishnah, and the Bryce is not bedin she'ein meruma. When there's no reason to suspect the guy's lying, then you don't cross-examine. Only have one tzedek, not two. Rav Ashi says, Masnisen kiddushan ukroi. The Mishnah, we have three answers. all of them are good. That the Mishnah is talking about Torah, the Mishnah is talking about a knas, the Mishnah is talking about when you're suspicious the guy's lying. So these cases you have to cross-examine. But the psukim that Rish Lakish used, I learned something else from there. Like he answered, but kroi, when it comes to the psukim of tzedek, and all that, echad ledin, one pasuk is talking about din and the echad of shara, and the other pasuk is talking about or the tzedek. You know why it says twice tzedek? That you should either do justice or you should do pshara. that you can do either one. What do you mean? Tzedek tiver echad ledin ve'echad lepshara. That one is for justice and one is for compromise. What's the case? Ketzad. Shteis finis. There are two boats. Two boats coming from opposite directions, a very narrow river, and they'll crash. And they'll both capsize. And they met each other. If they both try to cross the Stein Trivers, they'll capsize. But if one guy lets him move to the side, lets one go. And then the next one, there's plenty of room for both. Or two camels, will travel walking up this precipice of this mountain and reaching the summit. One is coming from east to west, the other is coming from west to east. They met in the summit, and they both then continue trying to walk. They're both going to fall off the mountain. If one of them waits for the other one to pass, and then they walk. So what do? First, we do din. We look, this is the right thing to do. One animal is loaded up and one animal isn't. So the animal is loaded up is much more tired. Well, one boat is full of gear or has wares, and the other one doesn't. They have to get to a destination more urgent. Then we say, let the camel that's not full or not loaded up with the boat not loaded up, pull it to the side, let the other one go through, and then you go. Another example, one is very near its point of origin, and the other one is much further. The other one is much more tired, they've already been out there a few days, let them go first. The one that's closest should give space for the one that's not closer to leave first. What happens? So that's sort of din. But what happens how you stay in Kravis? They're both everything, they were both exactly the same. They're both near their point of origin, stay in the Chayk, they're both the same distance. What do we do now? They're both exactly the same. So then we say, Hakl Pshara Beinain Umailas Chazur. This is Pshara. You know what Pshara is? Let them work it out. Let one of them compensate the other and say, let me go first and I'll pay a few dollars for it. And that's the way you make up Pshara. So sometimes you do din, sometimes you do Pshara. We did learn the first parak. A big argument is if Pshara is a good thing, a bad thing, a mitzvah. And that's talking about the Dayanim, what they should do. Encourage Pshara, not encourage Pshara. Here we're talking about the people themselves, what the right thing to do is. There's an interesting discussion. This is talking about a camel and a ship. What about two people? Do we say the same thing about two people? Do we say the same thing, that one guy is loaded and one guy's and they're coming this narrow path and only one can go at a time? Do we make the same distinction that one person is loaded, allow him to go first? And in fact, this whole din in the Torah that if you see an animal that can't bear its weight, you should help to remove it. The prika and tino, or help load up the animal. What about a person? He's carrying a bag that's way too heavy. Is there a mitzvah to remove it or not? Big machlek is Rishonim. By a person, we have the same kind of mitzvah prika tina. Others say there is no such mitzvah, but it's still a mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. And it falls under that category of Avos Yisrael, which then would have no bearing on this case here. Going back to those psukim, tzedek titter. You know what? A third drasha we learned from this passage. You should try to go to a bezin in your vicinity with a better one, where the rabbis are more learned. For example, go after Rabbi Lezer Lud. Go after Rabbi Lezer who is in the city of Lud. Go to Rabbi Yechim Azaki in the city of Berachel. It's a little bit odd that Rabbi Lezer ben Hurkanus, who was a student of Rabbi Yechim Azaki, should be mentioned first before Rabbi Yechim Azaki. And he lived in Rabbi Yechim Azaki, moved later to a city called Berachel. Now, what's the Berachel? There was a decree. The Gezeres Hashmat. The government said you cannot do mitzvahs, you cannot do a bris, you cannot do a wedding. So autonomy learned. So they had different signs that they wanted a minyan for a bris or a minyan by a wedding. So this is what they did. Kol rechayim, if you hear the sound of a mill crushing wheat, the burni, in this place called burni, that means it's a decoration. Shvua ben. This is a sign of a bris, because a week and then the 8th day is the bris. It's called Shvua ben. In Baba Kama, that we have Shua Ben, we said it's either Shom Zocher or it's Vachnach, the night before the bris. But here Shua Ben is referring to a bris, and they made a sign of crushing the wheat because that's they use that for medicine for the child, and or Oid Haned, if you saw a candle during the day being lit, or many candles at night, then it's a sign that Mishta Sham, a party is going on. Now, what exactly is this party? He says, Machlekes Rishonim, what's going on here? Some Rishonim hold, both of them are talking about a bris. Both of them are a bris. Like Tosha says right here, Oir Haner B'Brechel. So Tosha says, Mekan Nogul Hadlik Ner B'Mila. And a bris, you should light candles. I mean, Tosha learns the party we're talking about is candles. So there are many poskim that say, at a bris today, we make a suda. What is the basis for making a suda bris? Where does it say it make? Nowhere in the Gemara does it say you should make a suda bris. How do we know? So they want to learn from right here that if we talk about a bris and it says mishtahaya, there's a party here that shows you have to have a bris, and this is the marker right here. Other Rishonim learn that and Tosha says we learn from here to have candles. I don't know if people do that today, but to have candles lit by a bris. The other Rishonim learn that this party is talking about not a bris or a wedding. And in fact, that is the basis. We have a minute today by a chuppah. You have the parents that walk around with lit candles around the chassan and the kala. Where does that come from? Around the kala. Where does that come from? Sorry, around the chassan. Where does that come from? From this Gemara right here. What are these candles? If it's a wedding, the candles were to go around the chuppah. So this is the basis either for candles at a bris or at a party at a bris or candles at a chuppah. It says it twice. Shvu haben. Should have just said Shvu haben. So there are some Mepharshim who say that the second Shvu haben is a mistake. It should say Shvu habas. And there's a famous Trumas Hadeshin, which is quoted in the Noda B'Yehuda in Dogum Rav and Shulchan Aruch and Yerdea. And he says over there, he doesn't understand why you don't make the same kind of party you make for a baby boy for a baby girl. You're making a party because it's like making goimel. You're benching goimel that Hashem saved, that the boy came out alive and healthy. So why don't we make the same thing by a girl, like a Shalom Zocher for a girl as well? Actually, Lubavitch Rebbe made a big thing that you should make a kiddush on Shabbos when you have a birth of a girl. And I guess it's based on that Trumas Hadeshin. Then Gemara continues. Gemara gives more examples of courts that were famous for their knowledge. Go after rabbis where they're convened together. Go to Rabbi Lezer Lud. We're talking about you live in that vicinity because we learned before you cannot force someone to go to another city. So we're talking about in the same city, but there were different batadin and go to the better one. Go to Rabbi Yechim Zakir. Rabbi Shua Lepkin. Shua in the city of Pekin. Rabbi Gamliel Yavna. Rabbi Akiva Lebnei Brak. Rabbi Masya Leroimi. Many say Remi here does not mean Rome, but Remi is a city in Israel somewhere. Achar of Hananya ben Trabian Lesichni, city of Sichni, Rabbi Yosef Sipaidi, he was banished there by the Romans. Achar Rabbi Yehudim say in Tzibin, even say living in Tzibin, we had him bring more Psachim. Taisa says that that's actually Chutzlaritz. Achar Rabbi Yeshua Lagoyla, after Rabbi Yeshua Lagoyla, and that this is difficult. We just said Rabbi Yeshua was a rabbi in Pekin. What's he doing in Goyla? Goyla is Pumbedisa, exile, bubble, Pumbedisa. What's he doing there? So they say it's somebody else. And in Achad Rebbe Lebeisharim, Rebbe Lebeisharim, Achad Chami Lishla Gozis. And the rabbis, Lishla Gozis, the Sanhedrin Daf, that's where they are. Then the Mishnah said, Dini Mominus, we try to open up with trying to vindicate this person somehow. Says the Gemara, what exactly do the Dayanim say to sort of advocate on behalf of the defendant? This is what he say. After the witnesses finish their testimony, and they were cross-examined, we turned to them and said, who say you're telling the truth? So Ula said, what do you mean? But then you're intimidating them. They're going to shut up. They'll retract. Now, how can they retract? We have a rule that Eidim, once they testify, they cannot alter their testimony. Unless it's within the time it takes, say, Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. So Tosha asks, but the fact that the rabbis say after the witnesses finish everything, they say, who said you're saying the truth? That's it. It's already after Terech Dibur. Unless because they're saying it right after the testimony, it's considered part of the testimony, and the clock doesn't start ticking until after we said those words. Who said you're saying the truth? So it's intimidating, and they'll retract. So so who cares? Well, let them retract. We transfer the Eidim. We before they say a testimony, we move them from place to place. According to Rashi, means physically. We pick them up, we walk them around to confuse them. According to the Rambam, means we change the subject all the time to get a little distracted and to see whether they just prepared themselves rehearsed or this is they're real. They should start the item. They should be a bit confused. The Yachzman, and maybe retract. Says the Gemara, meet them. What do you compare? We're not getting them to retract. We are sort of confusing them. If they retract, that's their own decision. If we say to them that who said you're saying the truth and they retract, we've intervened and we cause them to retract. That's not right. This is what he said to them. We don't talk to the witnesses, we talk to the defendant. By the way, did you organize witness? Can you find witnesses that can find these two Eidim liars? And then they'll get punished for what they try to do to you. They try to give you a death sentence. That's not fair. So we're helping out the defendant, and at the same time, we're going to try to kill off these two witnesses. Why is the defendant's life any more valuable than two witnesses? We're trying to advocate in this person at the same time condemn the others. Says the Gemara, we know that the laws of Ein Zaymin, that we mete out punishment for these false witnesses only if the Bezdin already handed down its sentence. But here we're talking about during the discussion period. So we're not harming the witnesses. So they want to be we're harming the witnesses. But now we learned that Ein don't get killed until after the sentence. Hachami says, this is what I meant. Ilu shasei hai. If this person would have been quiet, what happens if the Bezdin says to the defendant, find yourself Eidim, do you have any? And the defendant thinks, oh yeah, I can find witnesses, but he won't say anything until the Bezdin hands out the sentence so that he can take his revenge against these witnesses. So we, in a way, are endangering the lives of witnesses by saving this person. Why are we intervening in this way? He'll wait till the Bezdin gives a sentence. To bring them witnesses to Mazalu, and we'll find them liars. We're harming these witnesses. So why are we trying to save one by killing the others? This is what you say. We say to them, can you find witnesses that contradict their story? Not that find them liars, contradict them. For example, they say, we saw the person that supposedly he murdered walking the next day down the street, and he was murdered another time altogether. So therefore, there's no punishment meted out to these witnesses. They're just mukhish. They lost their credibility, but they don't get harmed. So let's defend the defendant. We say, your words, it seems that this person might be innocent. That's what we're starting out with that kind of approach. This is what we say. We turn to the defendant, who obviously is very concerned. We say to him, look, if you didn't commit the crime, you didn't kill the person, don't worry about these witnesses. We will cross-examine them and we'll find out the truth. Rav Ashi says we make a declaration. Anybody who could advocate on behalf of the defendant, please come. Tanya Kavose the Bible, we learned actually that we say to them, don't be intimidated. If you are innocent, it'll all work out. We find by a woman who's accused of being a saita, it says in the pasuk, and we get her to drink the water, and she's very, very scared. Even if she's innocent, she's scared. It's quite a harrowing experience. So Rebbe says, the pasuk says, if you did not commit the adultery, the im loy shatis, you didn't deviate at all, then don't worry. And things will actually be a blessing for you. You'll have children easier and so on. We can from here we learn out. By din and the fashas, our first opening sentence is supposed to see if we can find some defense. And we tell them, don't worry, if you're innocent, don't panic. Just like in the case of Saita, we say, drink the water. If you're innocent, it'll be a blessing. Same thing here. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a good work, everybody. Sorry.